The gods will die. Every single one of them knows this. They have always known. Odin, the All-Father, who traded his eye for wisdom, learned the manner of his death centuries before it will happen. Thor, the thunder god, knows the serpent that will kill him is already circling the world beneath the waves. Freyr understands he will fall to a giant's flaming sword. They know, and still they wait. Because in Norse mythology, fate is not something you escape. It is something you face with courage, even when that fate is the end of everything. Ragnarok. The word itself feels heavy, ancient, inevitable. In Old Norse it means fate of the gods, or twilight of the gods, though some scholars translate it as doom of the gods. It is the prophesied apocalypse that will consume the 9 realms, a cataclysm so complete that the world itself will sink beneath the waves, the sun will be devoured, and the stars will vanish from the sky. But Ragnarok is not simply an ending, it is also a beginning. After the fire and the flood, after the death and the darkness, a new world will rise from the water, green and fertile, populated by gods reborn and 2 human survivors who will repopulate the earth. This is the paradox at the heart of Norse cosmology. Destruction is not the opposite of creation. It is part of the same eternal cycle. The Norse cosmos operates on principles fundamentally different from the linear progression of time found in many other mythologies. There is no eternal paradise waiting at the end of history, no final judgment that sorts souls for all eternity. Instead, the universe moves in great cycles, each ending giving birth to the next beginning. Ragnarok is the hinge upon which one age swings into another. The current world, with its gods and giants, heroes and monsters, is not the first, and it will not be the last. Before this world, there was another, and before that, another still, stretching back into a past so distant it dissolves into myth and mystery. When Ragnarok comes, when the present age burns away, it clears the ground for new growth, like a forest fire that seems to destroy everything but actually enriches the soil for the seeds that follow. This cyclical view of time may have been influenced by the harsh realities of Viking Age Scandinavia, where people lived close to nature's rhythms. They watched winter kill the land each year and spring bring it back to life. They saw generations rise and fall, settlements founded and abandoned, empires built and destroyed. Nothing lasted forever. Everything changed. The only constant was change itself. Ragnarok takes this observable truth and scales it up to cosmic proportions. If winter follows autumn and spring follows winter, if youth gives way to age and age to death and death somehow to new life, then why should the universe itself be exempt from this pattern? Why should the gods be eternal when nothing else is? The concept of Ragnarok also reflects a warrior culture's understanding of honour and courage. The Norse people admired bravery above almost all other virtues, especially bravery in the face of certain death. A warrior who fought knowing he would lose, but fought anyway with skill and ferocity, earned more respect than one who won easily. Ragnarok is the ultimate expression of this ethos. The gods know they are doomed. They know the giants will break free, the monsters will rise, and Asgard will fall. They could surrender, they could flee, they could try to negotiate or hide or beg for mercy. Instead, they prepare for war, they train, they forge weapons, they gather armies. When the final battle comes, they will meet their enemies on the field with weapons drawn and war cries on their lips. They will fight not because they can win, but because fighting is what gives meaning to existence. This is not nihilism, it is defiance. It is the assertion that how you face the inevitable matters more than the inevitability itself. Understanding Ragnarok requires understanding that it is not a singular event that came out of nowhere. It is the culmination of countless threads woven throughout Norse mythology, the logical conclusion of stories that began at the creation of the world. From the moment the first gods killed the primordial giant Ymir and made the world from his body, from the moment they created humans from driftwood on a beach, from the moment they built the walls of Asgard and made enemies of the giants, the seeds of Ragnarok were planted. Every alliance, every betrayal, every binding and breaking, every oath sworn and broken led inexorably toward this final confrontation. The death of Balder, the binding of Loki, the chaining of Fenrir, these were not random misfortunes but necessary steps on the path to doom. The Norse worldview did not separate fate from action. Fate was not something imposed from outside, like a playwright's script that characters had no choice but to follow. Instead, fate was woven from the choices people made, the consequences of their actions, and the web of relationships they built. The Norns, the three female beings who control destiny, did not dictate the future. They wove it from threads that already existed, threads made of past deeds and present choices. When Odin sought to learn the future, he discovered that the future was already present in the structure of the past. Ragnarok happens because of things the gods did long ago, choices they made when the world was young. They created their own doom through their own actions, and now they must face it. This brings us to the question of sources. How do we know about Ragnarok? Where do these stories come from? The primary sources for Norse mythology are two collections of Old Norse texts, the Poetic Edda and the Prose Edda. The Poetic Edda is a collection of Old Norse poems preserved in a 13th century Icelandic manuscript, though the poems themselves are likely much older, possibly dating back to the Viking Age or earlier. These poems, composed in alliterative verse and rich with kennings and metaphors, preserve some of the oldest and most authentic versions of Norse myths. Several poems in the Poetic Edda deal with Ragnarok, but the most important is Völuspá, the prophecy of the seeress. Völuspá is one of the most remarkable pieces of medieval literature. In it, a völva, a female seer or prophet, recounts the history of the cosmos from creation to destruction and rebirth. She speaks to Odin, who has summoned her from death to learn the future. Her vision begins with the void before creation, moves through the making of the world and the birth of the gods, catalogues the great events of mythic history, and then turns to the future, describing in vivid and often cryptic detail the signs, events, and battles of Ragnarok. The poem is not a straightforward narrative, but a series of images as moments, sometimes clear, sometimes puzzling, building a mosaic of doom and renewal. The völva sees brothers killing brothers, families torn apart, morality collapsing. She sees the great wolf breaking free and the serpent rising from the sea. She sees fire consuming the world and water drowning it. And then, in the poem's final stanzas, she sees the world rising again, beautiful and green, with a new generation of gods and a new humanity. The other major source is the Prose Edda, written by the Icelandic scholar and politician Snorri Sturluson in the early 13th century. Snorri's Edda is not a collection of old poems, but a handbook for poets designed to preserve the complex system of kennings and mythological references that Scandinavian poets used. To explain these references, Snorri retells the myths in clear prose, drawing on older poems and oral traditions. His account of Ragnarok, found in the section called Gylfaginning, the tricking of Gylfi, is more systematic and detailed than Völuspá, laying out the sequence of events in a more linear fashion. Snorri describes the signs that will precede Ragnarok, the breaking free of the bound monsters, the gathering of armies, the individual combats between gods and their opponents, and the aftermath of the battle. Both sources are invaluable, but both present challenges. The poems of the Poetic Edda are often obscure, full of allusions to stories we no longer have, and names whose meanings are lost. They assume an audience already familiar with the myths, so they skip explanations and background. Snorri's prose, Edda, is clearer and more organised, but Snorri was a Christian writing 300 years after Iceland's conversion to Christianity. Some scholars believe he may have shaped the myths to fit Christian ideas about apocalypse and resurrection, perhaps influenced by the Book of Revelation. The question of how much the Christian worldview affected the telling of Ragnarok remains debated. Some elements of the story, particularly the idea of a world reborn after destruction, and the survival of a human couple who repopulate the earth, seem suspiciously similar to Christian concepts of apocalypse and renewal. However, other scholars argue that cyclical time and rebirth are found in many pre-Christian cultures, and that the Norse had their own indigenous traditions of cosmic renewal that did not need Christian inspiration. Beyond these two major sources, fragments of Ragnarok appear in skaldic poetry, the complex court poetry composed by Scandinavian poets from the 9th century onward. These poems, often composed in honour of kings and warriors, sometimes allude to mythological events and can provide additional details or confirm elements found in the Eddas. Archaeological evidence also plays a role. Carved stones, especially the famous Gosforth Cross in England and the Ledberg Stone in Sweden, depict scenes that scholars interpret as moments from Ragnarok. Bound figures that may be Loki, great wolves that may be Fenrir, gods battling monsters. These visual sources suggest that Ragnarok was a well-known and important myth in the Viking Age, not just a literary invention of later Christian scholars. The story of Ragnarok, as we piece it together from these sources, is not a single continuous narrative. It is a collection of related events, prophecies, and battles that form a coherent whole only when assembled carefully. Different sources emphasize different aspects. Some focus on the cosmic signs and portents, others detail the battles, some dwell on the deaths of the gods, others look forward to the renewal. Together they create a complex, multifaceted picture of the end times in Norse mythology, a picture that is by turns terrifying, tragic, heroic, and strangely hopeful. The knowledge of Ragnarok comes through prophecy, specifically through the visions of a völva. In Norse society, völvas were women who practiced seidr, a form of magic associated with prophecy, fate, and the manipulation of destiny. Seidr was powerful, but also somewhat disreputable. It was associated with women and considered unmanly for men to practice, though some male gods, notably Odin, learned its secrets. Völvas could enter trance states, sometimes induced by sitting on a high platform and being sung to by a chorus, and in these trances they could see past, present, and future. They could speak with the dead and commune with spirits. They were sought after for their knowledge, but also feared and sometimes mistrusted. Odin, despite being the king of the gods, the all-knowing All-Father, does not know everything. His wisdom is vast, but it is not complete. This is why he wanders the world in disguise, asking questions, seeking knowledge wherever it can be found. He gave up, one of his eyes to drink from Mimir's well of wisdom. He hung himself on the world tree Yggdrasil for 9 days and nights, pierced by his own spear, to learn the secrets of the runes. He practices seidr, despite the shame it brings him, and he seeks out völvas, compelling them to share their visions even when they are reluctant. The völva who speaks in Völuspá is one such seer. Odin has raised her from the dead, from her grave mound where she lies in the earth. This detail is significant. She's not merely asleep or in a trance, she is dead, and Odin uses his magic to summon her spirit back to the world of the living specifically to answer his questions. She is reluctant. She does not want to return. She does not want to speak. But Odin compels her, and so she tells him everything. She begins with the distant past, recounting the creation of the world, the wars between the gods and the giants, the building of Asgard, the making of the first humans. She speaks of things Odin knows and things he has forgotten or never learned. And then, at his insistence, she turns her gaze toward the future. What she sees fills her with horror. She describes it in fragments, images piling upon images, her voice rising with urgency and dread. She sees the bonds breaking. She sees wolves running free. She sees the sun turning black and the earth sinking into the sea. She sees fire and flood. She sees gods fighting and dying. She sees the world consumed. Her prophecy is not a warning that can be heeded, not advice that can be followed to avert disaster. It is simply a statement of what will be. The future is as fixed as the past. Knowing it changes nothing. This is perhaps the cruelest aspect of Odin's quest for knowledge. He seeks to know the future, and he succeeds. He learns exactly what will happen, how it will happen, and who will die. He learns that he will be devoured by the great wolf Fenrir. He learns that his son Thor will kill the serpent Jormungandr, but will die from its poison moments later. He learns that his hall, Valhalla, where he's been gathering the greatest warriors from Midgard to fight at his side, will not be enough. The Einherjar, the slain warriors he has collected, will fight bravely, but they will lose. Asgard will burn. The gods will fall. And knowing all this, Odin cannot change it. The future is woven into the structure of the cosmos, tied into the roots of Yggdrasil itself. The Norns have already spun the threads. The tapestry is complete. All that remains is to live through it. Why then does Odin seek this knowledge? What is the point of knowing a doom you cannot avert? This question strikes at the heart of the Norse understanding of wisdom and fate. Knowledge, even terrible knowledge, is valuable in itself. To know is better than not to know, even if the knowing brings pain. Odin is willing to suffer for wisdom because wisdom is what makes him who he is. He is not the strongest god. Thor is stronger. He's not the most skilled in battle. Tyr is more courageous. But Odin knows things, he understands things, and that understanding, even when it reveals his own death, is his power. Moreover, knowing the future allows Odin to prepare not to prevent Ragnarok, but to face it with dignity and strategy. He can gather the best warriors, he can forge alliances, he can seek out weapons and wisdom that might tip the balance, if only slightly, if only for a moment. He cannot win, but he can make the losing as glorious and meaningful as possible. This is the warrior's way. This is the path of honor. You do not flee from fate. You do not despair. You prepare. You train. You sharpen your weapons. And when the moment comes, you fight with everything you have, knowing full well that your everything will not be enough. The prophecy itself, as recorded in Völuspá and elaborated in Gylfaginning, is structured in stages. First come the signs, the omens that Ragnarok is approaching. Then comes the breaking of bonds, the release of monsters and traitors who have been imprisoned. Then comes the gathering of armies, the march toward the battlefield. Then the battle itself with individual combats between specific gods and their fated opponents. Then the destruction of the world, fire and water consuming everything. And finally, in the aftermath, the emergence of a new world, a new generation, a new beginning. Each stage builds on the previous one, creating a rhythm of mounting tension and inevitable catastrophe. These signs begin subtly, moral decay and social breakdown, the kind of things that could be dismissed or rationalized. But they grow worse. Families turn on each other, sacred oaths are broken, the natural order unravels, then come the unmistakable physical signs. The sun and moon are swallowed by wolves. Earthquakes shake the mountains, the sea rises as crashes over the land. At this point there is no denying what is coming. The cosmic machinery has begun to move, and nothing can stop it. The prophecy does not simply describe events. It also names names, specifies who will fight whom, who will die, and how. This specificity gives Ragnarok a personal dimension. It is not an abstract apocalypse, an impersonal cataclysm. It is a series of individual tragedies, each god facing their particular doom, each warrior meeting their destined opponent. Odin will fight Fenrir, Thor will fight Jormungandr, Freyr will fight Surtur, Tyr will fight Garma, Heimdallr will fight Loki. These matchups are not random. They are meaningful, rooted in past relationships, old grudges, ancient conflicts. The Völva's prophecy has been passed down through the centuries, preserved in manuscripts written by Christian scribes in Christian times, yet it retains a power and a bleakness that seems to transcend any single religious tradition. It speaks to something fundamental about existence, the knowledge that everything ends, that loss is inevitable, that even gods can die. In a strange way, this makes the Norse gods more relatable, more human, than the eternal deity of other mythologies. They are not all-powerful, they are not invincible, they are mighty, yes, wise and brave and skilled, but they are also vulnerable. They can be hurt, they can be killed, and they will be. This knowledge does not make them despair. It makes them determined to live well, to act honourably, to face the end with courage. The Völva finishes her prophecy and sinks back into the earth, returning to death. She has done what Odin asked. She has revealed the future, and now Odin must live with that knowledge, carrying the weight of what will come, preparing as best he can, knowing it will not be enough, knowing he will lose, knowing he will die, and choosing to fight anyway. This is the essence of the heroic ideal in Norse culture. Not victory, but courage. Not survival, but honour. Not eternity, but meaning in the face of inevitable loss. Ragnarok does not arrive suddenly without warning. The cosmos gives signals, omens that the end is approaching. These signs begin subtly, woven into the fabric of daily life, but they escalate into unmistakable cosmic catastrophes that leave no doubt about what is coming. The first and most prolonged of these signs is Fimbulwinter, the great winter that precedes the final battle. Fimbulwinter is winter without end, without relief. 3 consecutive winters arrive with no summer between them. Snow falls without ceasing. Frost bites deep into the earth. The sun provides no warmth, only pale light that grows dimmer with each passing day. Crops fail. Animals die. Rivers freeze solid. The cold is relentless, cruel, inescapable. For people living in Scandinavia, where winters were already long and harsh, the idea of a winter that never ended would have been particularly terrifying. Winter was the season of death, of darkness, of huddling indoors and hoping the food stores would last. To imagine 3 years of that with no spring thaw, no green shoots pushing through the soil, no return of the birds or the warmth, was to imagine slow starvation and the gradual extinction of life. But Fimbulwinter is more than just extreme weather. It is a sign that the natural order is breaking down. The seasons are part of the cosmic structure, maintained by the gods and woven into the world tree. When the seasons fail, when winter overstays its time and summer does not come, it means the foundations of the world are cracking. The gods are losing their grip. The forces of chaos are beginning to overwhelm the forces of order. Fimbulwinter is the first visible symptom of a deeper sickness in the cosmos, a sickness that will prove fatal. During Fimbulwinter, human society collapses. This is described in Völuspá with chilling brevity. Brother will fight brother. Father will kill son. Kinship bonds, the most sacred ties in Norse society, will shatter. The poem speaks of an axe age, a sword age. Shields will be cloven, a wind age, a wolf age before the world falls. This is not just physical violence but moral disintegration. The values that held society together, hospitality, loyalty, kinship, honour, all dissolve. People turn on each other. They betray their families. They break their oaths. They abandon the old and the weak. Survival becomes the only law, and in pursuing survival, humanity loses what makes it human. This social collapse mirrors the cosmic collapse happening on a larger scale. Just as families tear themselves apart, so too will the cosmic order tear itself apart. The bonds between the realms will break, the bridges will fall, the walls will crumble, what was separate will merge, what was contained will break free. Fimbulwinter creates the conditions, both physical and moral, for the unleashing of the forces that have been held back since the beginning of the world. As Fimbulwinter drags on, other signs appear. The sun and moon, which have been racing across the sky each day pursued by wolves, finally succumb to their hunters. The wolf Skjöl, who has chased the sun since the beginning of time, finally catches it and devours it. The wolf Herti, who pursues the moon, succeeds in his hunt as well. These are not ordinary wolves but monstrous beings, embodiments of destruction and chaos. Their success marks the moment when pursuit ends and capture begins, when the thing that seemed eternal and safe, the daily rising of the sun, the nightly glow of the moon, proves to be vulnerable after all. The world plunges into darkness. The stars, which have provided navigation and mark the seasons, fall from the sky. Without the sun, without the moon, without the stars, there is no way to measure time. Day and night lose their meaning. The celestial order, which has governed the rhythm of existence since creation, collapses. This darkness is more than absence of light. It is the return of the primordial void that existed before the gods made the world. It is uncreation, the unmaking of order back into chaos. Earthquakes begin. Mountains shake and crumble. The earth itself becomes unstable. Trees are torn up by their roots. Cliffs fall into the sea. In Norse cosmology, the earth is the body of the slain giant Ymir, killed by Odin and his brothers at the dawn of time. His flesh became the land, his blood the oceans, his bones the mountains. When the earth quakes and mountains fall, it is as if Ymir's corpse is stirring, as if the dead giant is writhing in his long sleep. The very substance of the world is in rebellion against the order imposed upon it. The sea rises and surges over the land. Waves crash against cliffs that have stood since the world began. The ocean, which has been contained within its bounds, breaks free and invades the land. In some versions of the prophecy, this is described as the serpent Jormungandr, who has encircled the world since birth, finally releasing his tail from his mouth and thrashing towards shore. The serpent is so massive that his movements create tidal waves that drown coastlines and flood valleys. His venom sprays into the air, poisoning the atmosphere and raining down as toxic drops. The world tree Yggdrasil, which connects all 9 realms and provides the axis around which the cosmos turns, begins to tremble. This is perhaps the most ominous sign of all. Yggdrasil has stood firm through countless ages. Its roots reach into the deepest wells of wisdom and fate. Its branches hold up the sky. It has been gnawed by serpents, its roots chewed by creatures in the dark, but it has endured. Now, for the first time, it shakes. Some sources suggest that the shaking comes from the gnawing finally reaching a critical point, the tree's foundation so weakened that it can no longer support the weight of the worlds. Others suggest that the trembling is a reaction to the breaking of cosmic bonds, a sympathetic vibration as the structure of reality itself comes apart. These physical signs are accompanied by sounds. A rooster crows in the realm of the giants, a blood-red rooster whose call signals the gathering of forces. Another rooster, golden-combed, crows in Asgard, waking, the Einarjar, the dead warriors in Valhalla, summoning them to arm themselves for the final battle. A third rooster, soot-red, crows in Hell, the realm of the dishonoured dead, stirring those shadowy masses. These 3 cries echo across the 9 realms, a triple alarm that cannot be ignored. Dogs howl, wolves bay. The hound Garma, bound in the cave Nipahela, begins to bark. Garma is often described as the greatest and most terrible of all hounds, a match for any warrior, and his barking is a warning that his chains are weakening. His howls echo through the dark, a sound of pure menace and anticipation. Then come the breakings. The great wolf Fenrir, who has been bound by the gods with a magical chain called Gleipnir, finally breaks free. Fenrir's story is central to the mythology of Ragnarok. He's the son of Loki and the giantess Angerboda, brother to Jormungandr, the world serpent, and Hel, the ruler of the realm of the dead. When the gods first saw Fenrir as a pup, they were afraid. Prophecies warned that he would bring great harm. As he grew, his size and strength increased alarmingly. The gods decided they had to bind him. Twice they tried with ordinary chains, and twice Fenrir broke them easily. The gods challenged him to test his strength against these chains, appealing to his pride, and Fenrir, confident in his power, agreed. Both times the chains snapped like thread. Finally, the gods commissioned the dwarves to create a binding that could not be broken. The dwarves forged Gleipnir from 6 impossible ingredients: the sound of a cat's footfall, the beard of a woman, the roots of a mountain, the sinews of a bear, the breath of a fish, and the spittle of a bird. These impossible things made an impossible binding, a ribbon that looked soft and delicate but could not be broken by any force. When the gods brought Gleipnir to Fenrir and challenged him again, he was suspicious. The ribbon looked too weak, too flimsy. He sensed a trick. He agreed to be bound only if one of the gods would place their hand in his mouth as a pledge of good faith. If the binding proved to be a trick, if it couldn't be broken, Fenrir would bite off the hand. Only Tyr, the god of war and justice, was brave enough to make this pledge. He placed his hand between Fenrir's jaws. The gods bound the wolf, and when Fenrir tried to break free, he could not. The ribbon held. Gleipnir tightened with every struggle. Realizing he had been tricked, Fenrir bit down. Tyr lost his right hand. The gods took the bound wolf to a remote island and anchored the chain to a massive boulder sunk deep into the earth. They thrust a sword into Fenrir's mouth, the hilt against his lower jaw and the point against the upper, propping his jaws open. Foam and saliva ran from his mouth, forming the river Van, and there Fenrir remained, bound and gagged, unable to close his mouth, unable to break free, waiting. The gods knew this binding would not last forever. Fenrir would break free eventually. But they had bought time, postponed the inevitable, delayed the doom they could not prevent. When Ragnarok approaches, Fenrir finally breaks Gleipnir. The magical binding which has held for untold ages snaps. Fenrir's jaws close for the first time in centuries, and he howls in triumph and rage. His mouth gapes open so wide that his lower jaw scrapes the earth and his upper jaw touches the sky. Fire blazes from his eyes and nostrils. He shakes himself and mountains crumble. He begins to move toward Asgard, toward the gods who bound him, toward the revenge he has dreamed of for so long. Loki, Fenrir's father, also breaks free. Loki has been bound as punishment for his role in the death of Baldur, the most beloved of all gods. The gods took Loki and bound him to 3 rocks with the entrails of his own son, which turned to iron chains. Above him, they placed a serpent that drips venom onto his face. Loki's faithful wife, Sigyn, sits beside him holding a bowl to catch the venom. But when the bowl fills and she must turn away to empty it, the venom falls on Loki's face, causing him such agony that his thrashing creates earthquakes. Now, during Ragnarok, those bonds break. Loki rises free at last, and his rage at the gods held in check for so long erupts fully. He will lead the forces of chaos against Asgard. The ship Naglfar sets sail. This ship is one of the most grotesque details in the Ragnarok story. Naglfar is built entirely from the fingernails and toenails of the dead. In Norse culture, there was a tradition of cutting the nails of the deceased before burial, specifically to delay the completion of this ship. Every untrimmed nail added to Naglfar's hull, bringing the end of the world slightly closer. Now, after centuries of construction, the ship is complete. It is massive, large enough to carry all the giants and the legions of the dishonoured dead. The ship is captained by Hrym, a giant, and it sails from the east, carrying an army of frost giants and the dead who inhabit Hel's realm. From the south comes another army, led by Surtur, the fire giant. Surtur is older than the gods, a primordial being of pure fire who dwells in Muspelheim, the realm of flame. He has waited since before the creation of the world for this moment. His sword blazes brighter than the sun. As he marches north toward Asgard, everything in his path burns. Forests ignite, rivers boil away. The ground itself turns to molten slag. Surtur and his fire giants ride across the Bifrost, the rainbow bridge that connects Midgard to Asgard, and their weight and heat cause it to shatter and fall. Heimdallr, the watchman of the gods, who stands guard at the entrance to Asgard with his horn Gjallarhorn, sees all this unfolding. He sees Fenrir breaking free, Jormungandr rising from the sea, Naglfar sailing, Surtur marching. He raises Gjallarhorn to his lips and blows. The sound echoes through all 9 realms, a blast so loud and clear that every being, mortal and immortal, hears it and knows what it means. The final battle has begun. The gods of Asgard have known this moment was coming. They have prepared as best they could. But preparation, in the face of fate, can only go so far. Each god has a role to play, a specific opponent to face, a particular death awaiting them. Understanding Ragnarok requires understanding these gods, who they are, what they represent, and why their deaths matter. Odin, the All-Father, is the king of the gods, the god of wisdom, war, poetry, and magic. He is not a gentle or kind god. He is cunning, often ruthless, willing to sacrifice almost anything for knowledge and power. He has one eye, having traded the other for wisdom. He carries the spear Gungnir, which never misses its target. He rides an 8-legged horse named Sleipnir, the fastest steed in all the realms. His hall, Valhalla, is filled with the Einherjar, warriors who died bravely in battle and were chosen by Odin's Valkyries to join him. These warriors feast and fight in Valhalla, training for the day when they will be needed, the day when they will march out to defend Asgard. Odin has 2 ravens, Hugin and Munin, Thought and Memory, who fly across the world each day and return to tell him what they have seen. He has 2 wolves, Geri and Freki, who accompany him. He practices magic that most gods consider dishonorable. He wanders the world in disguise, testing the hospitality of mortals and gods alike. He is obsessed with knowledge, with understanding, with seeing the patterns that others miss. And this obsession has shown him his own death. Odin knows he will be swallowed by Fenrir, the great wolf who he helped to bind, who he tried to contain, will devour him. There is a terrible symmetry here. Odin, who sought to control fate, who gathered armies and wisdom and power to fight against the inevitable, will be killed by a creature he himself helped to create the circumstances for. By binding Fenrir, by turning the wolf from a potentially neutral force into an enemy filled with rage and a thirst for vengeance, Odin ensured his own doom. He could have killed Fenrir when the wolf was young, but the gods did not want to stain the sacred ground of Asgard with blood, so they bound him instead, and in doing so they made certain that when he broke free, his fury would be absolute. When Ragnarok comes, Odin will lead the gods and the Einherjar onto the field of Vígríðr, a vast plain where the final battle will take place. He will fight with all his skill and magic. His warriors will fight beside him, but it will not be enough. Fenrir will find him in the chaos of battle, and the wolf's jaws will close around the All-Father. Odin, who has ruled the gods, who has shaped the destiny of countless beings, who has sacrificed so much for wisdom and power, will die in darkness and pain, swallowed whole by the monster he tried to contain. But Odin's story does not quite end there. His son Vígríðr, the silent god, will avenge him. Vígríðr is known for his strength and for the special shoe he wears, a shoe made from all the scraps of leather that people have discarded throughout history. When Vígríðr sees his father swallowed, he will step forward, place his foot on Fenrir's lower jaw, push it down, and with his hands grab the upper jaw and tear the wolf's mouth apart, killing him. This act of vengeance is one of the few moments of victory for the gods in the entire battle, a brief triumph in the midst of overwhelming defeat. Thor, the thunder god, is perhaps the most beloved of all the Norse gods. He is the protector of both gods and humans, the slayer of giants, the wielder of the hammer Mjolnir. Thor is strong, brave, straightforward, and honourable. He lacks Odin's cunning and complexity. He is not subtle. When he has a problem, he solves it by hitting it with his hammer, and usually that works. Giants, trolls, monsters, they all fall before Thor. He rides a chariot pulled by 2 goats, and when he swings his hammer, thunder rolls across the sky and lightning splits the clouds. Thor's great enemy is Jormungandr, the world's serpent. Like Fenrir, Jormungandr is a child of Loki and Angerboda. When the serpent was young, Odin took it and threw it into the ocean that encircles Midgard. There, Jormungandr grew and grew until he became so large that he wrapped around the entire world and bit his own tail. Thor and Jormungandr have fought before. On one occasion, Thor went fishing with the giant Heimdallr and used an ox head as bait. Jormungandr took the bait, and Thor hauled him up from the depths, preparing to strike him with Mjolnir. But Hymir, terrified, cut the fishing line, and the serpent sank back into the sea. That encounter was unfinished business, and both Thor and Jormungandr know they will meet again. At Ragnarok, when Jormungandr rises from the ocean, thrashing and spraying venom, Thor will go to face him. The two will meet on the battlefield, and they will fight. Thor will strike the serpent with Mjolnir, and the blow will be so mighty that it will crack Jormungandr's skull and kill him. For a moment, it will seem like a victory. Thor, the great protector, has slain the world serpent, but in his death throes, Jormungandr will release a final cloud of venom, and Thor, standing too close, will breathe it in. He will stagger back 9 steps, and then he will fall, poisoned, and die. This is one of the most tragic moments of Ragnarok. Thor succeeds. He kills his enemy. He does what he has always done, defend the worlds from monsters, but success is not survival. Victory is not safety. He wins the fight, and it kills him. There is something deeply Norse about this, the idea that you can do everything right, fight with all your strength, achieve your goal, and still die. The outcome is not always just. The universe does not reward the worthy. All you can do is fight well, and hope that your fight meant something. Freyr is the god of fertility, prosperity, and fair weather. He is associated with peace, good harvests, and the health of the land. He is handsome, generous, beloved by mortals. He owns a magical ship that can be folded up and carried in a pocket, and a boar with golden bristles that can run faster than any horse. He also once owned a sword that could fight by itself, but he gave it away. He fell in love with a giantess named Gerda and sent his servant, Skirnir, to woo her on his behalf. Gerda was reluctant, but Skirnir eventually persuaded her by threatening her with curses and magic. As payment for his service, Freyr gave Skirnir his sword. This gift will prove fatal. At Ragnarok, Freyr will face Surtur, the fire giant whose flaming sword can destroy worlds. Freyr, weaponless or armed only with a lesser weapon, will fight bravely, but he will be no match for Surtur. The giant's sword will cut him down, and Freyr, the god of life and growth and prosperity, will die before he can see the new world that will rise after the flames. Tyr, the god of war and justice, has already sacrificed his right hand to Fenrir. He is brave, honourable, willing to suffer personal loss for the greater good. At Ragnarok he will face Garmr, the hound of hell, the great dog that has been bound in Nipperhellir. Tyr and Garmr will kill each other, both falling in the same moment, locked in combat, neither yielding. Heimdallr, the watchman, who has stood guard over Asgard since the beginning, who can see for 100 miles and hear the grass growing, will face Loki. This matchup is particularly significant because Heimdallr and Loki are opposites in many ways. Heimdallr is loyal, vigilant, dedicated to order and the protection of the gods. Loki is chaotic, treacherous, a friend who became an enemy. Their battle will be fierce, and in some versions of the myth they will kill each other, dying together, their blood mixing on the battlefield. The forces arrayed against the gods at Ragnarok are not random enemies, but beings with deep histories and personal grudges. They are the bound who break free, the exiled who return, the wronged who seek vengeance. Understanding their motivations helps us understand why Ragnarok is not just a battle, but the culmination of relationships that go back to the very beginning of the world. Surtur is the oldest of these enemies, predating even the gods themselves. He dwells in Muspelheim, the realm of fire, which existed before creation alongside Niflheim, the realm of ice. When the heat of Muspelheim met the cold of Niflheim, the resulting interaction created the conditions for life, for the birth of the giant Ymir and eventually for the creation of the world. Surtur has watched all of this unfold from his realm of eternal flame. He has seen the gods kill Ymir and make the world from his body. He has seen Asgard built and humanity created. He has waited, patient as fire can be patient, for the moment when he will reduce it all back to ash. Surtur's sword is not just a weapon but a force of nature. It burns with the heat of creation itself, the primordial fire from which the cosmos first emerged. When he swings it, it can cut through anything. When he marches, the heat radiating from him turns the ground to lava. At Ragnarok, after the gods have fallen and Asgard lies in ruins, Surtur will fulfill his ultimate purpose. He will fling fire across the 9 realms, and everything will burn. The forests will become infernos, the seas will boil away, the mountains will melt, the sky itself will catch fire. Surtur does not do this out of malice or cruelty. This is simply what fire does. It consumes, it transforms, it returns complexity back to simplicity, matter back to energy, order back to chaos. Fenrir, unlike Surtur, has very personal reasons for his rage. He was raised by the gods in Asgard, fed by them, cared for as a pup. Only Tyr was brave enough to feed him as he grew larger and more dangerous. The gods feared him because of prophecies, yes, but also because his very nature was wild and untamable. They tried to control him through binding rather than trust or understanding. When they finally succeeded in chaining him with Gleipnir, they did so through deception, violating the pledge Tyr had made by putting his hand in Fenrir's mouth. From Fenrir's perspective, he was betrayed. He was a child of gods and giants, perhaps neutral in the cosmic conflict, but the gods' fear and their decision to bind him rather than kill him or trust him created the very monster they feared. Bound and gagged, unable to close his mouth for ages, tormented by the sword holding his jaws open, Fenrir had nothing but time to nurse his hatred. Every moment of those long centuries reinforced his desire for revenge. When he breaks free, when Gleipnir finally snaps, his first thought is not conquest or power, but vengeance against the ones who imprisoned him. Fenrir's size is almost incomprehensible. His lower jaw drags along the earth, carving valleys as he runs. His upper jaw scrapes the sky. Between them is a void large enough to swallow armies. His eyes blaze with fire. His breath is hot wind. When he runs, the earth shakes. He is hunger personified, appetite without limit, need without satisfaction. And what he hungers for most is Odin, the one who orchestrated his binding, the king of the gods who condemned him to ages of suffering. Jormungandr, the world serpent, has a different story. He was not bound, but exiled. Odin took the infant serpent and cast him into the ocean, hoping distance would neutralize the threat. But the ocean is vast, and Jormungandr grew to match it. He circled the entire world, growing longer and longer until he could bite his own tail. In this position, he became part of the structure of the world itself, a living boundary between land and sea, between order and chaos. Some interpretations suggest that Jormungandr holding his tail in his mouth is what keeps the world stable, that his release is not just an attack but an unmaking of cosmic order. Jormungandr's hatred of Thor is also personal. Thor is the champion of order, the defender of both gods and men against the forces of chaos, and chief among those forces are the giants. Thor has killed countless giants. He has travelled to their lands specifically to hunt them. He is the bane of Jormungandr's kin. Their encounter while fishing, when Thor nearly killed him but the line was cut, left unfinished business between them. Jormungandr knows that one day he and Thor will fight to the death, and while he will die in that fight, he will also kill the thunder god. This mutual destruction is fitting. Both are warriors. Both are defenders of their own kind. Neither can yield, neither can compromise. They must fight until both are dead. Loki is perhaps the most complex and controversial figure in the lead-up to Ragnarok. He is both friend and enemy to the gods, helper and betrayer, insider and outsider. He is a giant by birth, but became a blood brother to Odin through an oath, sworn so long ago that neither may remember the words. Loki has helped the gods many times, using his cunning and shape-shifting abilities to retrieve stolen treasures, to trick giants, to solve problems that strength alone could not solve. He helped Thor recover his hammer when it was stolen. He obtained many of the gods' greatest treasures, including Odin's spear Gungnir, Thor's hammer Mjolnir, and Freyr's collapsible ship. But Loki is also a trickster, and tricksters are dangerous precisely because their loyalty is uncertain. They serve their own interests. They delight in chaos for its own sake. Loki's tricks often helped the gods, but they also created problems. He cut off the hair of Sif, Thor's wife, as a joke, forcing him to commission dwarf smiths to make golden hair for her. He transformed into a mare and seduced a giant stallion, giving birth to Sleipnir, Odin's 8-legged horse. His relationship with the gods was always unstable, built on usefulness and tolerance rather than trust or affection. The turning point came with the death of Baldur. Baldur, the son of Odin and Frigg, was the most beautiful and beloved of all gods. Everyone loved him. He was kind, wise, radiant. When he began having dreams of his own death, Frigg travelled through all the worlds and extracted oaths from every creature, every plant, every stone, that they would not harm Baldur. Only mistletoe, which seemed too young and insignificant to bother with, was left unsworn. The gods, believing Baldur now invulnerable, made a game of throwing things at him and watching them bounce off harmlessly. Loki, either out of jealousy, malice, or simply a desire to disrupt the order, discovered the mistletoe exception. He fashioned a dart or spear from mistletoe and gave it to Hörder, Baldur's blind brother, guiding his hand. Hörder threw the dart and Baldur fell dead. The death of Baldur shattered the peace of Asgard. The gods were devastated. They tried to retrieve him from Hel, and Hel agreed to release him if every being in the cosmos would weep for him. All did except one giantess, likely Loki in disguise, who refused. And so Baldur remained in Hel's realm, dead. The gods hunted Loki and captured him. They turned his son Vali into a wolf, who then tore apart Loki's other son Narfi. They used Narfi's entrails, which turned to iron, to bind Loki to 3 rocks. They placed a venomous serpent above him to drip poison onto his face. Only Sigyn, Loki's wife, stayed with him, holding a bowl to catch the venom. This punishment was meant to last until Ragnarok, and indeed it does, but when Loki breaks free, his transformation from ambiguous trickster to outright enemy of the gods is complete. At Ragnarok, Loki will not fight alone. He will command armies. The sources say he will pilot or command the ship Naglfar, filled with frost giants and the dishonoured dead from Hel. He will lead these forces against Asgard, against his former friends and companions, against the gods he once helped. This is not just rebellion. It is personal betrayal on a cosmic scale. Loki, who stood beside Odin, who drank with the gods in their halls, will lead the attack that destroys those halls. Why does Loki do this? The sources do not give us his inner thoughts. We can only speculate based on what we know. Perhaps he's always been an outsider, despite his blood brotherhood with Odin, always tolerated rather than truly accepted. Perhaps the death of his sons and his own binding, justified or not, has turned whatever affection he had into pure hatred. Perhaps his nature as a trickster means he simply cannot help himself, that chaos is what he is, and siding with the forces that will unmake order is inevitable. Or perhaps he sees himself as a liberator, freeing the bound, giving voice to the voiceless, standing with the giants and monsters who have been oppressed by the gods' order. The giants themselves, both frost giants and fire giants, have reasons to hate the gods. The world was made from the body of Ymir, the first giant, killed by Odin and his brothers. The giants are the descendants and kin of Ymir. From their perspective, the gods are murderers who killed their ancestor and built their paradise on his corpse. The gods have also waged war against the giants repeatedly, expanding their territory, taking resources, killing any giant who threatens them. Thor alone has slain hundreds, perhaps thousands of giants. The walls of Asgard were built specifically to keep giants out, marking them as enemies, as others, as threats. Yet the relationship between gods and giants is complicated. The gods and giants sometimes intermarry. Odin's mother was a giantess. Freyr married a giantess. Thor's mother was possibly a giantess, depending on the source. This mixing suggests that the enmity is not absolute, that it is political and territorial rather than inherent. But at Ragnarok, those complications fall away. The giants unite under leaders like Freyr and Surtur and march against Asgard, and whatever kinship ties might have existed are severed in the blood of battle. Garmr, the Hound of Hell, is another bound creature who breaks free. Less is known about Garmr than about Fenrir or Jormungandr, and some scholars believe Garmr and Fenrir might be different names for the same entity, or that Garmr is Fenrir's offspring or a parallel figure. What is clear is that Garmr is described as the greatest and most terrible of hounds, chained in a cave at the entrance to Hell's realm, and that when he breaks free, his barking echoes through the underworld, rallying the dead. The dead themselves are divided. The Einherjar, the warriors in Valhalla, will fight for the gods, but the masses of ordinary dead, those who died of sickness or old age or unheroic causes, dwell in Hell's realm, and many of these will join the forces attacking Asgard. Hel, the goddess of the dead and another of Loki's children, does not actively fight at Ragnarok in most versions, but her realm provides troops for Naglfar, and her presence looms over the battle. Death, which the gods have tried to hold at bay, which they have controlled by sending warriors to Valhalla and leaving the rest in Hell, now rises up to reclaim its due. Ragnarok does not happen in isolation. It is the culmination of a long chain of events stretching back through the ages. Some of these events were accidents. Some were choices made by gods or giants or men. Some were inevitable consequences of the structure of the cosmos itself. But all of them led here to this final confrontation. The creation of the world itself set the stage. When Odin and his brothers killed Ymir and made the world from his body, they created a cosmos built on violence, on the murder of a primordial being. This original sin, this founding act of violence, established a pattern. Order was imposed through force. Chaos was not reconciled with, but defeated, suppressed, bound. The giants, Ymir's descendants, became the eternal enemies of the gods. The two sides were locked in a cycle of conflict that could only end in total victory or total defeat. The creation of humanity added another layer. Humans were made to populate Midgard, the middle realm, the world of Earth between Asgard and the other realms. They were given life, intelligence, and fate by Odin and his brothers. But humanity's existence also meant mortality, death, and the need to manage the dead. This led to the division between Valhalla and Hell, between honoured warriors and everyone else. a division that would prove significant at Ragnarok when the dead rise. The gods' decision to bind rather than kill their enemies is crucial. When faced with Fenrir, they could have killed him. It would have violated the peace of Asgard to shed blood there, but they could have taken him elsewhere. Instead, they bound him. When faced with Jormungandr, they exiled him. When Loki caused the death of Baldur, they bound him rather than executing him. This pattern of binding suggests a belief that threats can be contained, that problems can be postponed, that the difficult choice can be delayed. But binding is not resolving. It is merely deferring, and everything that is bound eventually breaks free. The death of Baldur is often seen as the event that makes Ragnarok inevitable. Before Baldur's death there was conflict, yes, but also a kind of equilibrium. The gods ruled Asgard. The giants stayed in their realms. The monsters were bound. After Baldur's death, that equilibrium shattered. Baldur represented hope, goodness, the best of the gods. His death was a wound that could not heal, a loss that could not be replaced. The gods' joy died with him. The world became darker, colder, grimmer. Loki's punishment for causing Baldur's death also removed one of the few beings who might have mediated between gods and giants, who moved between the realms, who understood both sides. With Loki bound, with his children already exiled or imprisoned, the bridges between order and chaos were destroyed. There was no longer any possibility of negotiation or understanding. There were only enemies waiting for the moment to strike. The gathering of the Einherjar in Valhalla represents Odin's long preparation for Ragnarok. For centuries, Odin's Valkyries have flown over battlefields in Midgard, choosing the bravest and strongest warriors who fall in combat and bringing them to Valhalla. There, these warriors spend their days fighting each other in training, dying and being resurrected each evening to feast and drink and fight again the next day. They are building skills, maintaining readiness, forming a warrior culture of constant combat. Odin is assembling an army, the greatest army of heroes ever gathered to stand with the gods when Ragnarok comes. But there is futility to this preparation. Odin knows from the prophecy that the Einherjar will not be enough. He knows the gods will lose. He gathers warriors anyway. He continues to build his army even though he knows it is doomed. This is preparation not for victory but for a worthy defeat, for a last stand that will be remembered, for a fight that means something even though it is lost. It is the ultimate expression of the warrior ethic. Fight well even when you cannot win. The Völva's prophecy also mentions smaller signs and events that precede the main catastrophe. There are wars in Midgard, more frequent and more brutal. There is famine as crops fail. There are betrayals as oaths are broken. These human disasters mirror and perhaps contribute to the cosmic unravelling. In Norse thought, the realms are connected. What happens in Midgard affects Asgard and vice versa. If humanity falls into chaos, if the bonds of kinship and honour that hold society together dissolve, that dissolution weakens the fabric of the cosmos itself. Some sources mention specific individuals or events that serve as final warnings. A red rooster crows in Jotunheim, the land of the giants. This rooster, whose name is Fjalar in some versions, has one purpose: to signal the beginning of Ragnarok. His crow is not a random sound, but a call to arms, a signal to all giants that the time has come to march against Asgard. In Asgard, a golden rooster named Gullinkambi crows in response, waking the Einherjar, and in Hell, a soot-red rooster crows, stirring the dead. These three crows, sounding across the three key realms, represent the simultaneous awakening of all forces. There is no delay, no gradual build-up of armies. The moment the roosters crow, everyone knows, The warriors arm themselves. The giants begin their march. The dead rise. The cosmic machinery which has been winding toward this moment for eons finally engages. There is no turning back. Heimdallr's blowing of Gjallarhorn is the final unmistakable signal. Heimdall stands at the entrance to Asgard at the foot of the Bifrost, and his duty is to watch for enemies and warn the gods of danger. He has senses so keen he can hear grass growing and wool being shorn. He needs less sleep than a bird. He is the perfect watchman, never inattentive, never surprised. When he sees the armies approaching, when he sees Surtur's fires and Fenrir's jaws and Naglfar's sails, he raises the horn and blows. The sound of Gjallarhorn is heard in all 9 realms. It is louder than thunder, more piercing than any trumpet. It is a sound that cannot be ignored or mistaken. It means one thing: Ragnarok has begun. The gods who have been waiting for this moment, who have dreaded it and prepared for it and accepted it, now must face it. They arm themselves, they mount their horses, they ride out from Asgard toward the field of Vígríðr, where the final battle will be fought. Vígríðr is described as a vast plain, large enough to hold armies numbering in the millions. It is here that the gods and giants, the Einherjar and the dead, the monsters and the heroes will all meet. The field is neutral ground, not in Asgard or Jotunheim, but between them, a liminal space where the final reckoning will occur. The choice of battlefield is significant. This is not a siege of Asgard or an invasion of the giant lands. It is a meeting in the middle, a mutual confrontation where both sides bring everything they have. The armies assemble. On one side the gods of Asgard, mounted and armed. Odin in golden armour with Gungnir in his hand, flanked by the Einherjar in their thousands. Thor with Mjolnir, its head crackling with lightning. Freyr, weaponless but determined. Tyr with his one hand but his courage undiminished. Heimdallr, having left his post for the first time, ready to fight. The Vanir gods, Njörður and others, who are allied with the Aesir. And perhaps other divine beings, minor gods and goddesses, attendants and warriors, everyone who can fight standing ready. On the other side, Surtur and the fire giants, their bodies wreathed in flame. The frost giants, massive and cruel, armed with clubs and axes of ice. Fenrir, his jaws gaping, fire in his eyes. Jormungandr, coiled and ready, venom dripping. Loki at the helm of Naglfar, filled with the dishonoured dead and frost giants. Garmr the hound, barking and howling. And perhaps other creatures, trolls and dark elves, monsters from the depths, everything that has been held back by the gods' order now unleashed. The 2 armies face each other across Vígríðr. There is a moment, perhaps, before the fighting begins. A pause, a breath. The last instant of the old world, the world that has existed since the gods killed Ymir. Then someone charges, perhaps Odin, perhaps Surtur. The sources do not specify, but the charge comes, and the 2 armies crash together like waves meeting in a storm, and the battle of Ragnarok begins. The clash on Vígríðr is unlike any battle that has come before. This is not a skirmish over territory or a raid for plunder. This is existential combat, the final confrontation between order and chaos, between the forces that built the world and the forces that would unmake it. The scale is cosmic. Millions of warriors on each side, gods and giants locked in combat, monsters and heroes trading blows. The sky above darkened with the bodies of the slain sun and moon, the ground beneath shaking with every footfall of giant or god. The battle does not unfold as a single unified conflict, but as a series of individual duels, destined matchups between specific opponents. These pairings are not random. They are written into fate, into the structure of the prophecy itself. Each god has an enemy waiting for them, and each confrontation carries symbolic weight, representing the resolution of conflicts that have simmered for ages. Odin rides toward Fenrir, the All-Father on his 8-legged horse Sleipnir, the great wolf with jaws that span from earth to sky. Around them, the battle rages, but this duel is the centerpiece, the clash between the king of the gods and the monster he could not contain. Odin throws Mjolnir, and the spear flies true, striking Fenrir in the chest. But the wolf's hide is thick, his rage immense. The wound does not slow him. He lunges forward, and Sleipnir tries to dodge, but Fenrir is too quick, too massive. The jaws close around Odin. The sources describe this moment with terrible brevity. Fenrir swallows Odin whole. The king of the gods, who has ruled for uncounted ages, who sacrificed and schemed and sought wisdom at every cost, disappears into darkness. The Einherjar who see this cry out in horror and rage. Some rush to help, but it is too late. Odin is gone. The wolf that he bound, the monster born of his fear and his choices, has killed him. But vengeance comes swiftly. Vígríðr, Odin's son, witnesses his father's death and charges forward. Vígríðr is called the Silent God, rarely speaking, defined more by action than words. He's immensely strong, second only to Thor in physical might. And he wears the special shoe, crafted from all the discarded scraps of leather throughout history. This shoe is not merely protection. It is a weapon, a tool designed specifically for this moment. Vígríðr places his foot, clad in that thick leather shoe, on Fenrir's lower jaw. The wolf tries to close his mouth, to bite, but Vígríðr pushes down with all his strength, and the jaw is forced open. With his hands, Vígríðr grasps Fenrir's upper jaw and pulls. The wolf struggles, thrashing, but Vígríðr's grip is iron. Slowly, inexorably, he tears Fenrir's jaws apart, ripping the wolf's mouth, splitting his head, killing him. Fenrir, who seemed unstoppable, who swallowed the All-Father, dies in turn, vengeance extracted by the silent god. Elsewhere on the battlefield, Thor confronts Jormungandr. The serpent has emerged fully from the ocean, and his size is incomprehensible. His body coils across the battlefield, crushing Einherjar and giants alike beneath its weight. His scales are harder than stone. His venom sprays in clouds, burning through armor, melting flesh. Thor strides toward him, Mjolnir in hand, thunder rumbling with each step. The two ancient enemies meet. Jormungandr rears up, towering over even Thor's considerable height. The serpent strikes, fangs dripping venom, but Thor sidesteps and swings Mjolnir upward, catching the serpent under the jaw. The impact sounds like a mountain splitting. Jormungandr's head snaps back and he coils, regrouping. Thor does not wait. He charges forward, dodging the serpent's strikes, landing blow after blow with his hammer. Each impact cracks scales, breaks bones hidden beneath the serpent's flesh. Jormungandr wraps himself around Thor, constricting, trying to crush the god. But Thor's strength is legendary. He pushes outward, forcing the coils to loosen, and brings Mjolnir down on the serpent's skull with all his might. The hammer crashes through scale and bone, and Jormungandr's head shatters. The serpent's body goes limp, twitching in death throes, then lies still. Thor has won. He has killed the world serpent, fulfilled his destiny, achieved what he was meant to achieve. But as he stands over the dead monster, breathing heavily, a cloud of venom that Jormungandr released in his final moments drifts over him. Thor inhales it. The poison enters his lungs, his blood, his body. He staggers backward, coughing, trying to clear his lungs, but the venom is too strong. He takes one step, 2, 3, 9 steps in total, stumbling away from the serpent's corpse, and then he falls. Thor, the defender of gods and men, the strongest of the Aesir, dies poisoned by the enemy he just defeated. Freyr faces Surtur on another part of the battlefield. The god of fertility and prosperity, unarmed or wielding only a lesser weapon, stands before the giant whose sword burns with primordial fire. This matchup is perhaps the most unequal of all. Surtur is a force of nature, a being of pure destructive power. Freyr is brave, skilled, but without his magical sword he is overmatched. They fight nonetheless. Freyr uses speed and skill, dodging Surtur's strikes, looking for openings. He lands blows, but they seem to have no effect on the fire giant. Surtur's skin is flame itself. His body radiates heat that warps the air. Freyr's attacks pass through him, or glance off, ineffective. And then Surtur's flaming sword sweeps across, and Freyr cannot dodge quickly enough. The blade cuts through him, and the god of life and growth falls, consumed by fire, dying before the flames that will soon consume everything. Tyr and Garma meet in battle, the one-handed god of war and justice facing the great Hound of Hell. Tyr has lived with the loss of his hand for ages, a reminder of his sacrifice, of the pledge he made to bind Fenrir. Now he faces another monstrous canine, and he fights with the skill and courage that define him. Garma is savage, relentless, all teeth and claws and fury. The two clash, and the fight is brutal. Tyr's spear finds the hound's heart. Garma's jaws close on Tyr's throat. Both fall together, dying simultaneously, locked in a final embrace of death. Heimdallr and Loki, watchman and trickster, loyal guardian and ultimate traitor, face each other. Their enmity is old and deep. Heimdallr has always been suspicious of Loki, always watching him, aware of his dual nature. Loki has always resented Heimdallr's vigilance, his incorruptible loyalty. Now they meet as open enemies. The sources give few details of their combat, but they agree on the outcome. Both die, killing each other, their bodies falling together on the blood-soaked field. Other gods fall as well. The sources mention some by name, others only in passing. Njordr and other Vanir gods fight and die. Lesser gods and divine beings perish. The Einherjar, Odin's gathered warriors, fight with desperate courage, but they are mortal, and there are only so many of them. They kill giants and monsters, they defend the gods as long as they can, but one by one they fall, cut down by overwhelming numbers. The giants and monsters suffer losses too. Many frost giants die beneath the weapons of the Einherjar and the gods. Fire giants are struck down. Smaller monsters and creatures perish. But the forces of chaos are vast, and for every giant that falls, more press forward. The tide of battle turns slowly but inexorably against the gods. The defenders grow fewer, the attackers keep coming. The battlefield of Vígríðr becomes a charnel field, carpeted with the dead. Blood runs in rivers, bodies pile upon bodies. The air is thick with smoke and screams and the clash of weapons. The sky above, already darkened by the loss of the sun, grows darker still, with smoke from fires that begin to spread. The grass of the field, trampled and soaked with blood, burns. Trees at the edges of the battlefield ignite. The heat from Surtur and his fire giants radiates outward, setting everything ablaze. As the gods fall, as their champions die, as the Einherjar are overwhelmed, the sense of inevitability becomes crushing. This is not a battle that can be won. It is a battle that must be fought, but the outcome was never in doubt. The prophecy is fulfilling itself, word by word, image by image. Everything the Völva foresaw is coming to pass. The gods knew this. they have always known, and yet they fought anyway, because that is what honour demanded, what courage required, what their very nature compelled them to do. The fall of Asgard itself comes as the gods die. With Odin gone, with Thor fallen, with Freyr and Tyr and Heimdallr dead, there is no one left to defend the realm of the gods. Surtur and his fire giants, having defeated or bypassed the last defenders, march toward Asgard. They cross what remains of the Bifrost, which shattered under their earlier assault but still offers passage. They enter the golden halls, the beautiful buildings where the gods have dwelt since the beginning, and Surtur raises his flaming sword and brings it down, and Asgard burns. Valhalla, where the Einherjar feasted and trained, becomes an inferno. The halls of the gods, gleaming and beautiful, are consumed by flames. The throne of Odin, the treasuries, the temples, everything burns. The fire spreads with supernatural speed, aided by Surtur's will and the primordial power of his sword. Nothing can stop it. Nothing can withstand it. Stone melts. Metal liquefies. The very substance of Asgard turns to slag and ash. The other realms fare no better. The fire spreads beyond Asgard, consuming Midgard, the world of humans. Forests become firestorms. Cities and villages burn to the ground. Fields turn to ash. Rivers boil away, leaving only steam and scorched earth. The humans who survived Fimbulwinter, who endured the moral collapse and the chaos, now face fire that falls from the sky and rises from the ground. Most perish. Only 2, hidden in a place called Hodmimis Holt, the forest of Hodmimir, will survive, sheltered by forces we can only speculate about. The fire reaches other realms as well. Vanaheim, home of the Vana gods. Alfheim, land of the light elves. Svartalfheim, realm of dwarves. Even the lower realms, the places of darkness and cold, feel the heat. Only Muspelheim, already made of fire, remains unchanged. Everywhere else the flames consume, destroy, reduce to nothing. The death toll of Ragnarok is comprehensive and devastating. Nearly every named god dies. Odin falls to Fenrir. Thor dies from Jormungandr's poison. Freyr is cut down by Surtur. Tyr and Garma kill each other. Heimdallr and Loki die in mutual combat. The prophecy accounts for each major god, specifying how and by whom they fall. Some gods survive, but they are the exceptions, the few among the many. Vidar lives, having avenged his father. Vali, another of Odin's sons, also survives the battle, though the sources give few details of his actions during the fighting. Modi and Magni, Thor's sons, survive and inherit their father's hammer Mjolnir, though they must do so in a world that no longer needs a thunder god, as the storm and chaos have passed. Baldur and Herda return from Hel. This is one of the most mysterious and hopeful elements of the Ragnarok story. Baldur, whose death sets so much of the tragedy in motion, and Herda, who killed him unwittingly, both emerge from the realm of the dead after the battle. The sources do not explain the mechanism. Perhaps Hel's realm itself is destroyed in the conflagration, releasing its inhabitants. Perhaps the rules that governed death are unmade along with everything else. Perhaps the new world that will emerge requires Baldur's light and goodness, and so he is restored as part of the cosmic renewal. The survival of these few gods is significant because it ensures continuity. The new world will not be entirely new. It will be built by those who remember the old world, who carry forward some wisdom, some knowledge, some connection to what came before. They are the living memory, the bridge between ages, but the cost is staggering. The Aesir, the family of gods who ruled from Asgard, are almost entirely extinct. Frigg, Odin's wife and the queen of the gods, is not mentioned in most accounts of the battle, and her fate remains uncertain. Some sources suggest she dies during Ragnarok. others that she survives, others remain silent. Sif, Thor's wife, is similarly unmentioned. The goddesses generally receive less attention in the Ragnarok narratives, which focus on the warriors and the combat, but this does not mean they survive. More likely, it means their deaths are considered less relevant to the story the Skalds wanted to tell, a story of heroes and monsters, of warriors facing their doom. The Einherjar are wiped out almost to a man. These warriors, gathered from battlefields across Midgard over countless years, the bravest and strongest fighters humanity has produced, all die again, this time permanently. There is no Valhalla to receive them now. When they fall on Vígríðr, they fall truly and finally. Humanity is reduced to two individuals, Lífa and Lifthrasir, whose names mean life and life-yearning or eager for life, hide in Hodmimi's Holt during the catastrophe. The sources do not detail what makes this forest special, or how it protects them from the fires and floods that destroy everything else. Some scholars interpret Hodmimi's Holt as a kenning for Yggdrasil itself, suggesting that the two humans hide within or near the World Tree, which endures even as the world burns. Others believe it is a sacred grove, protected by powers older than the gods. Regardless of the mechanism, Lif and Lifthrasir survive. They sustain themselves on morning dew, a detail that emphasizes their innocence and their connection to nature rather than civilization. The death of the gods is tragic, but it also has a kind of inevitability and rightness to it. The gods are not eternal. They were born, they lived, and now they die. Their time is over. The age they created, the order they imposed, has run its course. They face their end with courage, and there is honour in that. But the universe does not pause for honour. It continues, transforming, renewing, moving forward. After the battle, after the deaths, comes the final destruction. Surtur flings fire in all directions. The flames rise higher and higher, consuming not just the land but the sky itself. Some sources say the stars catch fire and fall, the heavens burn, the boundary between realms dissolves in the heat. Everything merges into a single inferno, undifferentiated chaos, the opposite of the ordered cosmos the gods created. Then the sea rises. Water, which has been encroaching throughout the battle as Jormungandr thrashed, and the cosmic structure weakened, now overwhelms the land. Waves crash over mountains. The ocean floods valleys, plains and highlands alike. What the fire did not consume, the water drowns. The combination of fire and water is significant, echoing the primordial conditions before creation, when Muspelheim's heat met Niflheim's ice. Creation began from the interaction of fire and ice, and now destruction comes from fire and water. The world is returning to a primordial state, unmaking itself back toward the conditions from which it first emerged. The earth, we are told, sinks into the sea. The land that was made from Ymir's flesh dissolves back into the waters, submerged, hidden, gone. The mountains made from his bones disappear beneath the waves. The sky, made from his skull, collapses. The cosmic structure, carefully assembled by the gods at the beginning of time, comes apart. The 9 realms, distinct and separate, cease to exist as separate entities. All becomes water and void and darkness. This is the moment of maximum destruction, the nada of Ragnarok. Everything is gone. The gods are dead. Humanity is reduced to 2. The worlds are drowned and burned. The stars are extinguished. There is nothing but water and darkness, and even the memory of what was seems lost, submerged beneath the waves of cosmic flood. But the story does not end here. The Völva's vision continues beyond the death and destruction. She sees further, into the aftermath, into what comes after the ending, and what she sees is not eternal void but renewal, not permanent death but rebirth, not the end of all things but the beginning of something new. From beneath the waves the earth rises again. The völva describes it emerging green and beautiful, fresh and fertile. This is not the old earth restored, but a new earth, reborn from the waters, cleansed by fire and flood, ready to begin again. Grass grows without being sown. Fields become green without human or divine intervention. The land is fertile, abundant, whole. The sky appears above it, new and clear. The sun returns, but it is not the old sun that was devoured by Skjöll. It is the sun's daughter, born before her mother's death, now taking her place in the heavens. This new sun shines on the new earth, providing warmth and light. Some sources mention stars, appearing as well, new stars or old stars rekindled, arranging themselves in patterns that may be familiar or may be new. Water flows again, but now as rivers and streams rather than destroying floods. Springs emerge from the ground, lakes form in valleys, the water is clear, pure, untainted. Fish swim in the rivers. The new world is alive with possibility, with potential, with the promise of growth. The surviving gods gather. Vidar and Vali, Odin's sons who lived through the battle. Modi and Magni, Thor's sons, who bring with them Mjolnir, their father's hammer. Balder and Herda return from death, reconciled after the tragedy that separated them. These gods meet in the place called Idavöla, where Asgard once stood. The golden halls are gone, burned to nothing, but the location remains significant. The sources describe them finding golden game pieces in the grass, remnants from the old world. These pieces are from games the gods played before Ragnarok, tokens of a more innocent time when they gathered for sport rather than war. The discovery of these pieces is deeply symbolic. It represents continuity, the survival of something small and precious from the old world into the new. It also represents memory. The new gods remember what was lost. They are not starting entirely fresh, but carrying forward some knowledge, some connection to the past. These surviving gods discuss what happened. They talk about the old world, about Ragnarok, about the gods who died. They remember Odin's wisdom, Thor's strength, the battles and the friendships and the losses. This act of remembering is crucial. It means the old world is not entirely gone. It lives on in memory, in stories, in the consciousness of those who survived. The new age is informed by the old age, built on its ruins but aware of its history. Leif and Lifthrasir emerge from Hodmimus Holt. They step out into the new world, the only humans remaining, and they see a landscape transformed. Where there was fire, there is now grass. Where there was flood, there are now gentle rivers. The sky is clear. The sun shines. Birds sing. It is a paradise, unspoiled and perfect. Lif and Lifthrasir will become the progenitors of a new humanity. They will have children, and those children will have children, and the earth will once again be populated by human beings. This new humanity will be different from the old. They begin in a world without cities or kingdoms or wars, a world fresh and clean. They have the opportunity to build differently, to choose differently, to perhaps avoid the mistakes that led to the moral collapse of Fimbulwinter. Whether they will do so is left unspoken. The prophecy does not extend far enough into the future to tell us whether this new humanity will be better or worse, wiser or more foolish than the old. It simply tells us that they exist, that life continues, that the story goes on. Some sources mention that a new Asgard will be built, a hall called Gimle, roofed with gold, more beautiful than the sun. This hall will stand in the highest heaven, and righteous people will dwell there. Other sources mention Brimir and Sindri. halls in various locations where the good will feast. These details vary between sources and may reflect Christian influence, the idea of heavenly reward for the righteous similar to the Christian paradise. What is consistent across sources is the sense that the new world is better than the old. It is not just a restoration, but an improvement. The earth is more fertile, the gods are wiser, tempered by loss and memory. Humanity has a second chance. Even the language used to describe the new world emphasizes beauty, peace, and harmony. Where the old world was full of conflict, the new world begins in peace. The question of whether Ragnarok will happen again is not explicitly answered in the sources, but the cyclical nature of Norse cosmology suggests it might. If the world has gone through cycles before, if this is not the first Ragnarok but merely the latest, then it may not be the last. Perhaps in some distant future, the new gods will face their own decline, their own enemies, their own prophesied doom. Perhaps the pattern will repeat: creation and destruction, order and chaos, death and rebirth, endlessly cycling through time. But for now, in the immediate aftermath of this Ragnarok, there is hope, there is renewal, there is the possibility of something better. The old world with all its conflicts and compromises and accumulated grudges is gone. The slate is clean. What will be written on it is yet to be determined.